Hi there everybody and welcome to today's Art of Procurement. I'm your host, Philip Heidson. So you've just been appointed to a new CPO position. Your executive leadership team is looking at you to make an immediate impact while setting up procurement as a driver of sustainable long-term value. Your first 100 days, they can make or break your career. But where do you start? Well, today is day one of a special 5-part series, and it's brought to you in partnership with Efficio, the world's largest procurement consultancy firm. This series provides you with the roadmap that you need to hit the ground running. And today, to kick off the series, I spoke with Simon Whatson to discuss the importance of repositioning procurement and how to overcome some of the challenges that you'll face in convincing skeptical stakeholders that this time it's different. Simon is a principal at Efficio. He manages international teams of consultants and client resources to deliver large-scale procurement transformation projects, many of which are global and in a range of different sectors. And I started the conversation with Simon by asking him, why must a new CPO consider repositioning procurement?
I think there's a couple of answers to that. I think the first one has to do with a question that's been around in procurement as long as I've been around in procurement, which is, should CPOs have a position on the board? Mm-hmm. It's a position that procurement often wants and desires, but it's not always granted. And I think we have to understand the reasons behind that. And I think one of those is that businesses don't understand the value proposition of procurement. And so, the logical conclusion from that is that procurement needs to reposition itself in the business. But I think almost more critically than that, there is a danger, in my view, that if procurement doesn't reposition itself and come with a different proposition to the business other than just, one of administration and ensuring compliance to regulation and cost savings, then it may well cease to exist in the future, and businesses will find ways, ever more elaborate ways, to just circumvent the entire procurement process and the procurement function. So I think it's very important on two levels.
Now, you get to speak to a lot of folks from outside of procurement, executive level, whether it's CEO, CFO, CIO, COO, all those folks at that executive table. Do you feel that they're looking at procurement and thinking of it as more of this could be a self-serve model and perhaps there's some technology that can actually take away procurement? Or do we have a little bit of time left before perhaps it gets to that line of thinking?
I think there's potentially a bit of time to go. I mean, I don't think that executives are looking to cull procurement immediately, but I think, as businesses continue to grow, to want to need to become more efficient, to need to continually show value, there's going to be more and more onus on the individual functions to stand up and be counted. And I think it will become quite obvious if procurement doesn't reposition itself from what it is today and doesn't start to be a partner of choice for the business. That I think there's definitely the day will come when the executives will decide, actually, we don't need this anymore.
Yeah, and when we're talking about repositioning, we're thinking about it from a value proposition perspective, like really looking to go above and beyond perhaps the things that we do within our businesses today.
Yeah, I mean, the classic with procurement is that, today, I think in a lot of businesses, it's this type of process policeman, this kind of final price negotiator that kind of comes in and maybe negotiates the last percentage point or two of a contract, and generally runs around the business trying to make sure that people are complying to the process, the procurement itself put in place. And I think repositioning in this context means moving to being more of a value creator. Now that might be generating savings for the business, but it could also be helping the business gain a competitive advantage in the market, whether that's through bringing innovation or other things. There are many ways that procurement function can add value, but at the moment it struggles to grasp, in many cases, a lot of those. And I think clearly in having this conversation about repositioning, we couldn't ignore the role of technology and digitalization in this, but it's going to be more than just technology that we're talking about in this repositioning.
Right. I think, I don't know if you see the same, but for me, a lot of it is about alignment. We can't truly hope to maximize the impact that we can have on the business if we're not really aligned. And a lot of times we aren't particularly aligned with certainly a lot of our stakeholders.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. And I think that comes, partly it's maybe down to stakeholders and, they need to have a bit of an open mind when they're dealing with procurement. But I think a lot of it, we need to look at ourselves in procurement and think, are we actually talking the right language when we speak to the business? Are we talking in a language that they can understand? And by that, I mean, going away from just talking about savings and process the whole time. Do we understand really what the business wants, and are we aligning ourselves to those needs? Because again, if we're not, it's quite likely that procurement will just be bypassed.
Yeah. Now, you've seen a lot of procurement organizations who have gone on this journey. You mentioned one of the challenges there about kind of talking the language of the business, which I think is really important. We sometimes get stuck in our own acronyms and, probably overcomplicate a lot of what we do. But when you see, CPOs who have gone on that journey, what are some of the key challenges that they've had to overcome?
Yeah, I think, if you look at it, probably the biggest one is having the self-awareness to challenge yourself in procurement and your kind of approach to date, and say, well, what part of this is not working and what can I do to influence and change that? And I think that's probably one of the most hard, one of the most difficult things to do is sort of change from within and change your own mindset. So I think that's definitely one big challenge. The other is, obviously, if it's going to do something different in the future and procurement's going to reposition itself, it's going to need different people. And if you look at some of the procurement functions that have been successful on this journey to date, they've gone out and recruited and managed to retain, in many cases, a completely different type of talent, which is, more strategically minded. They're potentially more digitally literate as well. And it's almost a world away from the current type of skills profile that you see in procurement.
So when you talk about, new procurement talent, what kind of skills are you thinking about?
I think there's going to be a definite shift towards softer skills. And it's interesting, actually, because we've just done a study on this, and about 80% of respondents who were executives in procurement agreed that soft skills would be either essential or very important to procurement talent of the future. And if you drill down a little bit deeper into that, then you get a clue, I think, as to what people are expecting procurement to be in the future. So, number one skill was the ability to influence and lead. I think that's obviously very important if procurement's going to start shaping the agenda. Then another one was around the skill and capability to challenge conventional thinking. And I think that comes back to what I was saying before. It's as much about challenging procurement and ourselves in terms of the way we see things as it is about the business. And then the other one, just to mention, was, creativity, innovation, problem solving was one that comes up a lot. And that one, it sort of hints at a procurement function in future, which is a bit more project-based, more agile, and not one that just tries to solve every problem with the same sort of solution, whether it's an RFX or some other procurement process.
So when you think about, how CPOs have been successful, what are some of the key activities, I guess, that CPOs have taken to actually help them achieve that repositioning of procurement?
I think the first thing that they've done is they've understood how procurement can add value to their business in future, but then crucially as well, how success against that is going to be measured. Now, there's a lot of temptation to think that procurement's only value is around savings generation, but CPOs that have really thought hard about, actually, in my industry, in my sector here in this company, what is it that procurement can bring to this organization, and how is that going to be measured, and how am I going to shout about it? They're the ones that have set themselves a very good, solid foundation to deliver against that. I think the other thing that companies will need to do is clearly have a vision, but also a roadmap for achieving that vision. And any roadmap at the moment is going to have to include technology in that, with the sort of technology that's available, especially in procurement. But the technology can't be considered in isolation. And I think understanding the impact of technology on the people is going to be crucial. And what I mean by that is, if you're bringing in technology to, do a lot of the kind of transactional activity or free up time of your people, you're going to have to make sure that those people have the capability and experience to kind of play that strategic role that you're hoping that technology will allow them to play.
That technology on its own isn't the silver bullet. That's something we talk about a lot as well, on the show, that so many times you implement the technology and think it's going to fix everything. Yeah,
and you can understand why. I mean, people are drawn to gadgets. They're They're taken in by the hype, and it's very tempting as well to throw money at a problem. It's often the sort of easiest thing you can do. But, this is a well-trodden path. I think people do realize now that you can't just implement technology without understanding the impact on people. But the fact is, it's a lot easier said than done. Understanding how people's jobs are going to change, what skills they're going to need in future, how you're going to help them get those skills, how you're going to motivate them to play that new role. These are all things that it's actually very difficult to just sort of bring together and affect a change over a matter of weeks and even months. It can take a lot longer than that. So, whilst I think people know that technology alone can't be the solution, I think, the examples of where companies have truly been successful on that journey are quite few and far between.
So when we're talking about repositioning of procurement, one of the things that comes to mind is the marketing, the branding, the positioning, if you will, almost from a sales perspective of what procurement can do and painting the picture of the art of the possible within the organization. I wonder if you could just speak to whether that's something that you see a lot of successful procurement teams doing, or whether it doesn't really matter how you brand it as long as you're doing a job that the rest of the business wants you to do for them.
Yeah, I mean, clearly the latter there is the most important thing. And if you're doing a job that the rest of the business wants, it will ultimately generate pull for its services. But you can definitely make your life easier, in my view, by branding procurement differently. And I think, if you look at some procurement functions that don't just brand themselves as administrative functions, as, ensuring compliance to regulation, generating savings, they actually brand themselves as, for example, providing, insight and foresight to the business, or, delivering a competitive advantage. And, we've got to be honest, in procurement, we do have a bit of an image problem. It's not traditionally seen as the most sexy function to go and work, but there's no reason why it shouldn't be. If you think about procurement, it's essentially sitting between the supply chain and the business at this critical juncture. It touches pretty much every other function in the business, whether it's finance, whether it's operations, other functions too. And so it's definitely got the opportunity to brand itself much differently than it does today. And I think by doing that, it will speed up the transition to this new elevated position that it should seek.
Yeah, the important thing then is delivering on the promise, making a new promise to the business and then being able to deliver on it. And that is really, I found that's so important in helping drive the change management of any repositioning.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like anything else. Great branding gets you time to prove yourself, essentially. Yeah. And I think once you've done that, then the next best thing you can do, I think, is have a roadmap and a journey that includes quick wins to kind of build momentum and keep people believing. I think trying to sort of aim towards a big splash change some time down the future is not the way to go. I think those organizations that try for plan kind of milestones along the way, and they work in quite an agile way towards their vision, those are the ones that I think will be most successful.
Hi there, I want to thank you for listening into today's podcast as part of our series that helps you take the actions that you need in your first 100 days to position procurement for long-term success. If you'd like to get more insight into how to approach your first 100 days, or to reference all the tips that are covered in this series, Efficio has created a handy downloadable checklist. It's really easy to grab your copy of this checklist. All you need to do is go to artofprocurement.com/100 days. That's artofprocurement.com/100 days.